Good morning, everyone. It is Friday, April 3rd. This will be part 2 of the first set of notes for Unit 5. Yesterday, I posted the first set of notes for part 1, and today will be part 2. Remember that you should be filling out the Google Docs assignment where you just simply fill in the blanks for the notes as we go through. So hopefully yesterday, if you had time to get to it, you got part 1 done. And then after the screen recording today, you should be able to get the rest of the notes done from part 2. And then you can simply submit that assignment to me when you are done. And I will give you some points for that on Skyward. It should be a pretty easy grade for you. So hopefully you're doing that so we can get moving throughout the unit. So yesterday we finished off with Alexander Hamilton's legacy, and now we're going to move on and start with Jay's Treaty. So what was Jay's Treaty? First of all, remember we just finished up the Revolutionary War, which again was between England and America. So there's still some tension between the United States and England during this time period. So John Jay went over and said, hey, England, please stop seizing U.S. ships. We're not really enjoying the fact that you're stealing our ships because obviously we're having ships go out for trade. So he said, stop doing that. He said, please vacate any of your forts on the frontier because England still had some forts in the colonies or in the States in America. So they said, please vacate those. Also said, you need to repay us for any stolen crops and slaves from the Revolutionary War. And lastly, that there's a treaty on commerce in the West Indies, meaning that any type of trades taking place in the West Indies, which again is where like the Caribbean islands are, they wanted to create a treaty dealing with how those type of negotiations would work out in the West Indies. Well, what happens? Jay returned with only 2 of these met, and this made George Washington upset. However, he accepts it as, hey, at least we got 2 out of the 4 instead of 0 out of the 4. So then there's the Whiskey Rebellion. So what happened is Alexander Hamilton, in 1791, he put a tax on whiskey, which angered frontier farmers because, again, they were producing whiskey, and they did not feel it was right that they would have a tax on it. So in December of 1794, revolts break out in western Pennsylvania. Now you might be asking yourself, well, how come it took 3 years? Again, as I reiterated a lot during previous lessons earlier in the school year, a lot of these things took a lot of time because, again, communication took a long time to go from place to place during this time period. So again, sometimes it might seem like there's a huge gap, but again, things moved much slower back then. So revolts break out in western Pennsylvania over this tax on whiskey. Washington calls on the army to go and suppress this rebellion to put an end to it, and this is really setting up an example of how federal law authority will follow through. So you cannot just rebel against taxes, you cannot just rebel against the national government, because the government will then step in and put an end to it. So this is a good a good example of how the national government does have quite a bit of control on the things that are taking place in this time period. And obviously today, the government has a lot of power and control over things that are happening in our society as well. So this is just an example of how that started. Then we have Pinckney's Rebellion. We see a map here of the southeast corner of the United States. This is Florida, which again was still Spanish owned, and this is kind of the eastern seaboard, which were part of our original 13 states. So this is area claimed by Spain after 1793. So what did Pinckney's Treaty do? It established intentions of friendship between the U.S. and Spain. So it's basically dividing the land in this area of what isn't yet the United States, because again, everything west of the Mississippi was owned by Spain after the French and Indian War, and everything to the east was owned by the colonists. And so this defined America's western boundaries and guarantees America's right to the Mississippi River. Again, having travel during this time period and being able to transport items and trade to different places, rivers and waterways were extremely important. So having access of the Mississippi River for America was a really big get for them. So this is really important that they got this in Pinckney's in Pinckney's Treaty. Then we get to John Adams Presidency. He is the second president of the United States, so he will come directly after George Washington. So the French were plundering American ships and had broken off diplomatic relations. So even though France helped us in the Revolutionary War, now there was some division and there was some a feuding going on between the two. So Adams restores relations with France, but runs into some issues with the XYZ affair. So what is the XYZ affair? Whoop, wrong one. The XYZ affair here. So basically what happened really quickly is it was a diplomatic incident between France and America in the late 18th century that led to an undeclared war at sea. So basically what happened, very quickly, I'll summarize this. In 1793, France went to war with Great Britain and America remained neutral, which made France upset because, again, France helped the United States during the Revolutionary War. So France is like, hey, we helped you. How come you're not helping us? Well, America didn't feel like they were in any type of place to go jump into another war because they didn't have the financial money and they also just didn't want to get into another war. So this caused some issues because, again, the French were mad that we signed and had some a treaty called that Jay's Treaty I just talked about. French were mad about this. So basically this was a tension between now France and America because now America was not helping France when they were battling England, because when France helped America fight England, France thought we should help them now too. So this would lead to a quasi-war, so it was basically an undeclared naval war that results from this XYZ affair. What else happened during John Adams' presidency? There was an ideological war between the Federalists and Anti-Federalists. Again, we've talked about this difference between the two. Federalists were in favor of a stronger central government. Anti-Federalists were in favor of more state power in government. The Revolutionary War generation was splintering into two sides. So again, there was one side that was in favor of this one way of having government. There was the other side that favored the other way. So there was this continual tension between the two. The Alien and Sedition Acts. So the Alien Acts empowered the president to report dangerous aliens at his discretion, meaning if they thought that there was individuals who were trying to go against the government, they could deport them as being dangerous to the cause. And then there was the Sedition Act, which criminalized making any false statements that were critical of the government. So again, if you made any false claims that were critical of the government, you said anything bad about the government, you could be thrown into jail. Now, this caused some problems because the Republicans thought this was against the First Amendment, which is freedom of speech. So again, you see this tension between Federalists and Anti-Federalists when it comes to analyzing and interpreting the Constitution. Opposition to the acts, here's Thomas Jefferson. And Jefferson and Madison lead the outspoken anger against these acts. Again, Jefferson and Madison being Anti-Federalists and in favor of stronger states' rights. And then we have what are called the Kentucky and Virginia resolutions, which declared the acts as, quote, alarming infractions on constitutional rights. So Thomas Jefferson and James Madison thought these acts were unconstitutional. So this anger led to Jefferson's defeat of Adams in 1800. So who will become our third president? You are correct. It is Thomas Jefferson, who will then defeat Adams to become our third president. So that is part 2 of the notes. Hopefully you are able to complete your notes based off of part 2, and you can then submit your notes when you are done. As always, let me know if you have any questions. Happy Friday, everybody. Have a great rest of your day.